Welcome to this session of the DoD Cloud Exchange. My guest is Mike Howard, the Engineering and Digital Transformation Division Chief at the U.S. Transportation Command. Mike, thanks so much for taking the time and welcome back to the discussion.
Jason, thanks again for having us. I look forward to this conversation.
Now, we haven't talked to you in a couple months, so I'm sure there are things that have changed, but I'm going to start maybe at the beginning a little bit and talk a little bit about IT modernization. TRANSCOM is I think when we spoke last fall during a different panel, you guys were just getting some things going. You guys were getting some momentum. So you mentioned, I think, at that event, a recent IT modernization memo. So let's start there. What does that entail? And how's that set the tone, the path for TRANSCOM over the next year and a half?
Yeah, absolutely. So for context, we have had a published IT modernization memo now for about a little over a year. We are currently in development of refining said memo. And so what I will touch on is, really the memo helps us set the tone for all of our IT efforts. It really shows kind of strategic level importance of modernization in an organization like TRANSCOM that really needs to strive at being at the leading edge of transportation industry. At TRANSCOM, we're not only shifting our software development processes to be more agile, but at an organizational level, we're also shifting to be more agile-minded. So the modernization memo really kind of projects some goals over the next 12 to 18 months. Kind of to categorize those goals, that really looks like agile development processes going from waterfall to agile. Looking at authorization from being ATO to continuous ATO. Looking at our tightly coupled monolithic software architectures and decoupling those into containerized microservices. And then really finally getting after, what we know today as the way things communicate through ports and protocols, and really adopting API-based communication. And then finally, what I'll say, Jason, about our modernization memo, the key ingredient to it is this year we added, last year we had the COO and the CIO as signatures authorities. This year we've added the CFO. And while we're synergized from a business perspective, we want to be cost informed as we strategically move through this memo, certainly over the next 12 to 18 months.
And underneath all of this, because we are here at the DoD Cloud Exchange, is the cloud that underpins so much of this. We'll get into where you are in using the cloud, how that kind of benefits and really helps move forward. But I'm going to start with the last thing you said, adding the CFO to this IT modernization memo. First of all, as you said, you're refining it, so it's still in the works, but obviously the CFO is on board. What does that mean from a cost perspective? How does this help you understand, hey, how do we pay for these things? How do we have a continuous sustainment model for software, for the continuous ATO and the like?
Yeah, so first and foremost, it's one thing to say what you're going to do. It's another thing to say, how are you going to use it? So we wanted to ensure that, the CFO in some of I'll talk a little later about another initiative. I sat down specifically with the CFO who wants to ask the questions of, yeah, that's great for a proof of concept. That's what you want to achieve. I'm more concerned with, this looks like a great thing that we're going to do. And it seems like it's going to be something that I need to sustain from a cost perspective. To quote our CFO, she says, one of my biggest problems is managing our IT portfolio. And to that is, it's the same problem, I think, across the entire DoD that we have. The fortunate thing for TRANSCOM is we are a working capital fund, whereas the appropriated combatant commands, have to demonstrate, a lot more scrutiny. We have some flexibility, but we also know with that flexibility needs to have some responsibility. Our memo before, I think, kind of missed an opportunity where we could bring in and be more cost informed. I think the other thing that does, to answer kind of what we're talking about with the audit capability, this now provides some, if you think cost, schedule, and performance, this provides the audit capability of that cost, schedule, performance, and then helps us, be good stewards of taxpayer dollars as we maneuver through the cloud.
For folks who maybe had heard, oh, okay, I understand what the working capital fund means, but maybe go a step further and say, okay, because Transcom is a working capital fund, what does that mean for the IT portfolio? Why is that a challenge for the CFO and probably for the CIO in your office to manage the money? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so just like any appropriated fund, we still have a requirement to plan out the budgetary requirements. But we have some flexibility, knowing that there's more flexibility when you have a working capital fund. And so instead of just writing on that we know these things are going to occur, that we know that that we're going to be paid for the services that we provide. We want to be good stewards. We still have there's a cap, right? So you still have to be a good steward. And again, without having the CFO incorporated into the strategy for this, I think we were, it was a necessary refinement that we had to include.
The more that agencies can bring in their CXO community into the CIO world, the better they'll be. One of the big things in the civilian world is the Federal IT Acquisition Reform Act, FITARA. It does apply to DoD, but I think for a lot of civilian agencies, that CFO-CIO relationship has really, those who have perfected that, or at least worked on that, have been more successful with FITARA than maybe those who still struggle. Since we are talking about cloud and IT modernization, let's move over to this modernization memo. You talked about several different priorities that are aligned to that memo. Let's start with the agile development process. We talked about this again in the last time we caught up a few months ago. How's agile really kind of opening the door to the continuous ATO, to the microservices, to the adopting APIs?
Yeah, so first and foremost, with our memo, we knew, so our memo phase 2, for context of phase 1, we really looked at what are different measures of performance or metrics that are critical to software development. So one being, agile development. How does an application exist in cloud? DAST and SAST, secure and dynamic application security testing. We looked at containerization. When we looked at active cyber defense, zero trust. There's the buzzword, right, Jason? We looked at really a lot of things that mature an application through modernization. This time around, we kind of classified it into 3 categories. And we talked about the evolution of developing from waterfall to agile. And as I stated before, our portfolio in terms of maturity it's all over the place. So in terms of gaining a continuous ATO, we know that in this new DevSecOps world, where you have CI/CD automation pipelines, you have a strong reliance on the way microservices communicate. And so what we really see is that if we are not developing agilely and we're waiting for something that has to be consumed in an agile method, but we're trying to still do that in a waterfall method, then like I said before, if we're really going to get it to mature from an authority to operate to a continuous authority to operate, then by doing so without utilizing agile, honestly, for lack of better words, we'd be fooling ourselves. If we're not, if we don't have the ability to take on software development in small segmented pieces, and find ways to deliver features faster, and we do this in more of a waterfall approach, then again, getting to a continuous ATO is not possible.
I know you guys have been on this journey for some time. It takes a while, to use the Navy term, to move the battleship. Where are you today? How many applications do you have that are moving? How quickly are you able to deliver capabilities? And I know the answer, I'll get ahead of you, Mike, is it depends, but give me a sense of maybe a use case or an example where, hey, we were able to deliver this capability in six weeks instead of 6 months or 6 years?
Yeah, so I'll speak entirety first, and then we'll hit at some of the questions you were asking after. Today, Transcom is operating approximately 60 of the TWICA systems in a cloud environment. It's an AWS government cloud. Moving forward, we're expecting to increase. For understanding, we have 60% of our enterprise is operating in a infrastructure as service capability. I would say, to be transparent, probably about 5% of that is containerized. Projects going forward. So we have the development of 2 DevSecOps ecosystems. Both of those are currently deployed in a non-production capability, close to achieving an authority to operate, and are in discovery of what we would say growth of CSSP capability. And I say that specifically. Today, as we know, the CSSP certifications for a cybersecurity service provider are clearly defined in an ESM v10, a neat listing. So I want to touch on this for just a sec. So what we realized is that doesn't fit clean as we want it to be yet in a DevSecOps platform. And what we've discovered is when we look at the different pieces that make up our software factory, we realized that at an infrastructure as service, yeah, absolutely, there's really clear defined capabilities that a cybersecurity service provider can give you. But we also realized that within the platform, there's a series of security operations center or virtual security operations center capabilities that are needed. So I said all that to say this. There are lots of wonderful software factories out there in the DoD, Black Pearl, Kessel Run. We're realizing that for us, because of the mission systems that we're going to have in our platforms, we really got to take some time and ensure that the security for the DevSecOps platform is really in order. And so while we're not as mature as we want to be in terms of IL level, we have goals to be at IL 6. We're not currently there. We have a lot of the applications who have, for lack of better words, have sprinted and are modernizing in a cloud environment. And we're absolutely working on 2 DevSecOps ecosystems that of course will help us with achieving a continuous ATO and really modernizing our entire enterprise versus just doing separate pipelines and having separate maturity levels by application.
One thing that you mentioned that I just want to make sure I'm clear upon is you are creating, you said 2 separate DevSecOps environments. Obviously, they have different needs. Is there a reason why you said one, we need 2? Is it just one's on AWS, one's on Azure, or however you position it? And then second is, did you when you said you looked at some of the other software factors out there, they didn't reach the level of security that maybe you needed, and was there the delta between them getting to IL6 or getting to that level that you needed it would take too long or cost too much? Or give me a sense of why you decided you needed your own versus, again, leaning on Black Pearl or Army Software Factory or whomever.
Yeah, so I think one is the uniqueness of global logistics. Most people look at the NIPRNet as a more or less a ways to communicate on day to day. For global logistics, this is really where the mission network is, because of the tie-in with commercial partners. So we're unique, right? The IL6 is certainly it's on the horizon for us, but it's not necessarily the make or break yet. We looked at and modeled our own ecosystem based off of some of the underpinnings of Platform One's Big Bang. And then we modeled it based off of the needs of where our current applications are. So for lack of better words, we have a lot of applications, probably not uncommon across the DoD, that have, old code, have old, have development teams that have been working on these applications for a long time. By providing our own ecosystem, this gives us ability to, utilize a strangler method to ensure that those applications can coexist, and that we will, drive success based on our own wants and needs. I don't want to speak to whether or not we feel that Black Pearl or Kessel Run are not a secure enough environment. That's not necessarily a determination or what I intended maybe to say. What we realize though is for our own environment, and the mission systems, the NSM-8 requirements that are needed for an application, we've determined that the ability to provide a security operations center for the platform is kind of like is something that we're at a standstill for and trying to discover for our own ecosystems.
I think that helps a lot. I think people hear, oh no, another software factory in the DoD. Why can't we just have one to rule them all or two to rule them all? And I think kind of getting underneath the covers and understanding there's a lot more to it than just, oh, I can use Kessel Run or somebody else. We have our own kind of set of mission needs and the like. You mentioned the strangler method. I want to go down that path. You, at one point, you said you had about 60 systems in AWS. You're expecting that to increase. 60% of their enterprise is in the infrastructure service capability, 5% are containerized. Connect those two dots between the strangler method of modernizing applications and then taking more advantage of these cloud and DevSecOps platforms.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what's key to that is, being mindful of the strangler method, having an ability to have applications that can sprint to a cloud, have applications that are modernizing to a DevSecOps platform and exist in a Kubernetes-like runtime environment. It all has to, and then asking, having the ability to then app rationalize those applications that perhaps cannot containerize, cannot serve the purpose of high availability, some of those methods. So that's really our approach with the strangler method today. And so while we're being mindful of that capability or that particular methodology, that truly is the one of the values of developing your own ecosystem, because when you develop when you identify the software factory capability that's needed, you're doing that based off of an ability to inform product owners, scrum masters on what it is they need to refactor their applications in order to achieve a pipeline through a DevSecOps platform. And so, higher end, that's a down and in. From a higher end, we want to be able to give timelines and inform, again, why we don't want to say that modernization is at a certain point is going to take forever. And so we want to say we want to identify, what does the entire enterprise look like today? If we have applications that, as we look at them and we understand what is their ability to refactor, I think we then have we get a choice then to say, should we, right? So if we looked at something that is huge, the code is got several thousand lines of code and it's going to take forever for that application to do it. It gives us choices then to say, okay, do we want to, take the time to try to break down and containerize this application? Or do we want to find something that is, on the back end for software as a service capability? And that, that's truly, I think, the benefits of our approach today. Because I can say that because we really have discovered that. And what's nice is, again, having the CFO now, it's kind of a voice of reason. You say, okay, these are the things that could occur. This is where the current capabilities of the applications are. This is the plan to move them along and containerize them. And now we say, somebody says to us, well, what's the cost for all that? And so again, another benefit of adding CFO onto that signature line.
You bring up cost again. Let me just quick, a lot of discussion around FinOps, a lot of discussion around technology business management framework, this idea of, okay, how do we measure the cost of cloud services? There's a brand new memo from GSA for using schedules to buy SaaS, software as a service services. How are you guys looking at that cost structure and making sure, even with a working capital fund, that you can afford it, that you're not going to overpay it, that you don't, breach the laws of payment and spending more money than you have?
Sure. Yeah, so I think, so as we mentioned in the beginning, TRANSCOM has been doing cloud operations since 2016. So we've been in there for a while. We've got a lot of lessons learned. And one of those is, budgeting off of, compute and store costs for the entirety, and then being, focused at different parts of the year on what the maturity is of systems migrating. So what do I mean by that? What's nice is today with our modernization memo, we're able to somewhat forecast what the probability is of cost, schedule, and performance for an application to migrate, whether lift and shift or migrate through a DevSecOps platform. What's nice about that is we are tied in with our enterprise IT portfolio mission area manager, or our COO that's listed on our modernization memo. And we give quarterly updates. Those quarterly updates actually go to an update to our CEO. So what I would say is, a good lesson learned for FinOps here, for us anyways, was it's about transparency, keeping cost, schedule, performance in the loop of how we're utilizing the cloud and informing the right stakeholders at the right time.
It's amazing when it comes to anything that deals with money. It's just about talking about it, right? We always are told, don't talk about money, but in the end, we kind of have to ensure, okay, how am I spending it? Where is it going? How's it being used? Mike, we've talked a lot about this memo. And as I said at the beginning, underpinning that is the use of the cloud. So let's just touch upon that real quick, because I know the cloud is a tool to the end result, which is getting the missions better services, better capabilities, and more success. You mentioned some systems in AWS. How are you starting to move towards a SaaS environment? How are you starting to increase the amount of cloud services you're using? Where does JWCC fit in? Give me a sense of how you all are starting to look at and take advantage of cloud services.
Yeah, so a couple of things to unpack there. So we'll start with the SaaS, and then I'll move into some of our JWCC usage. I would say that today, when it comes to SaaS, we've got some challenges we haven't worked out yet. I would say that's across DoD, but I'll go specific to TRANSCOM, and then I'll talk about why. So, with computing models like infrastructure as service and platform as service, really the trade-off is the cloud does it for you or you do it yourself. From a cost perspective, that's fantastic. When you get to SaaS, then you move further from the control. I think what we're realizing is, we want to have a choice on how far we move away from the control. And I think today we're seeing that it's kind of risky for some applications, not all, and the data that they produce to move away that far. And so I know for us, we're eager to adopt SaaS. I think from a budgetary, finance, good stewardship, I think it makes a huge benefit. But again, in our world, it's kind of funny. I've had conversations with like civilian industry partners, and it's about assurance and survivability as well. And sometimes, I think in civilian industry partners that I've talked to, that's hard to realize, right? Because survivability and assurance means something different to them as it does to the DoD. You mentioned JWCC, and so I'll talk a little bit about that. I think first and foremost, the JWCC contract for us allowed for some greater flexibility. One, the 4 CSPs that are in that contract vehicle certainly has helped us. First, with our current CSP, it opened up the capability for IL6 that we didn't have with our current broker. It gave us some more training, which was very welcomed. So a lot more training opportunities for our personnel to get smart. And then for us, it also opened an opportunity for us to start down the journey of multi-cloud. And I won't dig in it too deep here, but we have a new focus of utilizing the disconnected state capabilities built in that another cloud service provider has with the JWCC contract. And because we are utilizing that, then we have the ability to discover some of the disconnected state capability that is provided.
All right, I know you said you weren't going to dig too deep, but sure, you do pique my interest. Maybe define what you mean disconnected state capabilities. You mean like sandboxes that, hey, we can test out certain capabilities, or do you mean more like the diddle, the disconnected, low bandwidth type of services? Help me just understand a little bit more.
Absolutely. I figure you would latch onto that, so I'm good with that. So we have a project today that we're calling TRANSCOM Anywhere. We want to utilize both Microsoft Azure as a cloud hosting with some of the complements that the disconnected Microsoft Azure stack provides. We're utilizing our TRANSCOM NIPRNet as essentially an ability to establish the services that we host today at TRANSCOM in an Azure cloud, and having those services in a micro-segmented fashion and deployed so that we can segment data and ensure that it is provided to the right person at the right time anywhere. And of course, some of the things that it'll provide for us. So we all know that having the benefits of a cloud computing capability is phenomenal until it isn't. And so what we realized is that once we achieve a platform as a service capability of micro-segmented data, containerized applications, the next thing would be is how can that micro-segmented data exist in a DDIL or denied, degraded, intermittent, or limited environment? And so TRANSCOM Anywhere has a focus to, one, utilize our current NIPRNet that we provide today, to segment that capability in a CI/CD fashion. Tomorrow, it looks like taking the global logistics data in a micro-segmented fashion and providing it anywhere, regardless of the transport, at any time, to the right person at the right time.
This sounds to me like this is a pilot, maybe a few hundred users and a few dozen users, and sure, what's the timing around it? Give me a little bit more background about the plans.
Yep. So this is scheduled. It's a 3-phased with about 12 months per phase. High level, year 1 looks like an understanding of the landing zone, building out what services are needed for the environment, and then culminates with a beta test. Today, I think we looked at about 25 users. That might increase as we learn more about the environment. It also culminates with 70 of 91 zero trust target level activities. Phase 2 looks like the deployment phase. So it would look like the migration of on-prem services that we provide today being housed into the Azure cloud capability. Then phase 3 looks like the test and use cases of the disconnected state where we'll look to put the Azure Stack capability and provide some of the microsegmented data in certain parts of the, geographically, to try to get it to as close as to what we would provide the warfighter tomorrow.
That's exciting. I think the one thing that stands out to me is 3 years. Now, you can't take this stuff lightly. I get it. There's a lot that goes into it. Is that purposefully maybe a little longer than you want it to be because you know that there's complexities, that you know that this isn't as easy, or is there more of a bigger reason why you all are laying it out over kind of a 3-year horizon?
Yeah, so great question. And the answer to that really is, first and foremost, this is culture, right? So this is a cultural change for how we, currently operate today. We would be introducing things like, virtual desktop infrastructure, disconnected state capability through something that we've never really used before with an Azure Stack. So first and foremost, I suppose it's an understanding of, how this is new for global logistics. And we wouldn't want to, we don't want to rush to that. Secondly, I would say that in the first year, this is really, proof of concept. And we, again, with our CFO, we're in line to prove out in that first year that this is really something that we want to do. Instead of, saying, yeah, we're all in and we have no points of return. And so, the phasing really helps us, get to some decision points to ensure that this is exactly how we want to proceed forward.
I had a great conversation with the Department of the Navy CIO, Jane Rathbun, a couple months ago, and she talked about the use of VDI, and the Navy has something called Nautilus, and there was if you remember the VPN vulnerability when that was had a big issue back in January, February timeframe, that forced them onto Nautilus. I think once folks get this capability for VDI in your world too, they're going to be like, yeah, I don't ever want to go back. So it's obviously smart to take that crawl, walk, run, but I think you'll be running more quickly than you think you will. Just because I think once folks get to test it out, they're gonna be like, yeah, I want this all the time. I'm sure you're probably already getting folks who are excited for it.
Yep.
Mike, in the last few minutes we have together, let's just talk about going forward. You mentioned a bunch of different priorities, and I appreciate you sharing the new program. Mike, you got your plate full. There's obviously a lot going on across TRANSCOM. When you start looking out into the future, are there certain ways you're going to say, how are we making sure we're successful? What's that measure looks like? You have the specific metrics. You can say how much are we spending, how much is in the cloud, what percentage. But from a people side, from a mission side, are there certain metrics you're definitely looking at more closely?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as first and foremost, I think the most important metric is, how are we utilizing the scalability and reliability of the cloud to align to global logistics, and probably more focused is, contested logistics. How do we provide the data, the right data, the federated data that is needed, and then how are we, providing the warfighter in this case the ability to only have the data that person needs, so that if something should happen to that data, how do we have ability to defend that data? That really is kind of the thesis for, I think, what becomes our overall, report card for the cloud is, and really what are we describing? We're describing, the benefits of a fully modernized platform as a service, where you have microsegmented containerized applications that exist for business function, have immutable code, and are really, in lack of better words, are defendable. And so when you say kind of what is our, what is the end goal, what is the end state, it's truly that. It's truly that capability to be, business focused. It's not that you do zero trust, it's how you use it, right? And this is the same thing here is, it's not that we're doing the cloud, it's how we're using it. And I think if we get to that state, then in terms of modernization, I know modernization probably goes on forever, because there'll always be something new that you can, modernize. But if we were going to say, hey, let's give ourselves a check mark, I think it's that ability.
I think that's a great way to put it. Not that you're doing zero trust, but how you're using it. Not that you're doing the cloud, but how's that impacting mission? I think that's a terrific way to look at it. Mike, unfortunately, we're out of time for this session of the DoD Cloud Exchange. So let me thank my guest. Mike Howard is the Engineering and Digital Transformation Division Chief at the U.S. Transportation Command. Mike, always a pleasure to catch up. Thanks for sharing all the good work you're doing.
Jason, I really look forward to these opportunities to share some of the value that we're bringing to the DoD from a logistics perspective. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, so thanks again.
I'm Jason Miller, and you've been watching Federal News Network. Now let me send you back to the studio for more on the DoD Cloud Exchange.